Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We here are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfree, and I am your host, per usual. Before we get any further, just wanted to briefly, again, encourage everyone to interact with the product a little bit. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, review, any and all of it helps. If you've already done that, just the sharing, I think is probably the most important thing. You can tell people about us, and that helps the show tremendously. So I thank you all very, very much for that. I mentioned this the last couple of episodes. We hit a nice little growth spike over the last month and a half or so. So thank you. That's mostly down to you people. I try to keep my content, my quality consistent, content as well. So if you guys are starting to share that around and helping us gain traction, that is the lion's share of that. So thank you very, very much. To anyone newer, welcome. Yeah, happy to have you. I've been doing this for longer than I care to admit in terms of years. So thank you all very much. All right, with that out of the way, we're going to be talking mostly about UFC 270 tonight. That was the big pay-per-view event, the UFC's first pay-per-view event of the year. 2 title fights and not a great supporting cast in terms of name value, but we got a lot of first-round finishes, some of them pretty sweet. So we'll go over all of the results, and that's kind of all I've got. Not a lot of news this last week. Everyone was kind of gearing up for this, and so that's going to be the lion's share of the show. We'll see if anything crazy breaks between now and then. But as we get into that, I have a special treat for all of you. Longtime listener to the program will recognize this person. Again, if you're one of the newer group, this might be your first exposure to him, but he's around here whenever he so chooses to be. I'm happy to have him on whenever he's available. But 411 Mania's jack of all trades, because he's in pretty much every zone at some point or another. Jeffrey Harris is back with us. Jeff, it's been a while. How the heck are you?
It's been a while. Happy New Year to you, Robert. Happy New Year to the podcast. Sorry for my lateness coming in. Wow, Skype. What is going on over here? It's like Skype and Microsoft and Outlook. It's all this craziness. But here we are. Thank you, Robert, and ready to talk some UFC 270.
All right, let's jump into that then. And let's start with UFC, because UFC 270, main event, the heavyweight championship of the UFC. Champion Francis Ngannou defending his title against interim champion Ciryl Gane. I've got to eat some crow on this one as far as my prediction goes. I predicted a Gane win. I scored it for him. I will stand by that. However, that's not to say that giving it to Ngannou is wrong by any stretch of the imagination. There was one score that, before we get into the fight itself, I want to briefly yell about. Sal D'Amato, that semi-sentient can of soup, who for some reason continues to be hired to judge professional fights, gave this 4-1 to Francis Ngannou, and that is an utterly indefensible score. You scored this 3-2 for Ngannou, cool. You give him rounds 3, 4, and 5. I'm not arguing with you. I disagree about the 5th round and only the 5th round, but that's largely a degree of nuance, and there's enough room for interpretation that I'm not going to insult anyone for scoring the fight that way. Giving Ngannou either the 1st or the 2nd round is some pretty hefty and rank BS. I can't. That blows my mind that this idiot is still getting hired. Stop hiring this man. He's no good. He's no good at his job. That said, the first 2 rounds played out kind of how I thought they would. 3rd round is where things changed. Francis Ngannou timed a high kick or a body kick above the waist from Ciryl Gane, got a takedown, and turns out he's got some decent top control. He was able to get some mat returns when Gane would build back up, and he just, throughout rounds 3 and 4, won them pretty handily with takedowns and top control. He never found a lot of success striking. He missed a lot of punches, some of them pretty badly. But Gane was never able to really get free once he was able to wall walk. 5th round is where I draw a distinction. Gane does good work for about a minute and a half on the feet, then gets a takedown, settles into top position, and here I owe an apology to Gon, and one to Francis Ngannou as well. There's a moment when Gon on top looks like he drops back for a leg lock. And if that had been the case, that's one of the most boneheaded decisions you could ever make. There's no reason to do that, none whatsoever. I looked at that clip again, and Ciryl Gane does not, apropos of nothing else, drop back for a leg. He gets swept. He brings his left leg up under him to facilitate either just changing position, starting a pass, what have you, any number of reasons he could do that. Ngannou times it, and he chops his right leg under that leg, so it drops Gane to a hip. He then uses an underhook on his left side. Ngannou off balances and drops Gane to his back. It was a really nice sweep. It was missed in real time by everyone, me included. And it's actually to Gane's credit that he was able to turn that into a legitimate leg attack rather than just get stuck on his back immediately. So I owe an apology to Gane for potentially insulting his intelligence in that situation. And a little bit more kudos to Francis Ngannou for hitting a really nice sweep. So I still score the fifth for Gane because he actually does stuff, whereas Ngannou just kind of rides out the last 2.5 minutes or so on top, doesn't do a whole lot. But if you thought it was enough to give him the round, I don't think it's wrong. I think that's a perfectly defensible scorecard under the scoring criteria, so it kind of is what it is in that respect. So, Jeff, what did you think of the fight? We'll get into the repercussions of this in a second, but the fight itself.
The fight sucked. The fight was everything I hate about heavyweight fights.
Yeah.
I knew once it got out of the first round, I mean, I actually thought it was probably a smart strategy that, Ciryl was taking the fight into the later rounds, because I thought that was how he had the best chance to win. But that I was wrong about. But slow, sluggish, terrible cardio, sloppy striking, sloppy footwork, sloppy defense. Ciryl Gane, through multiple points, was standing right in front of Francis Ngannou with his hands completely down, his hands at his side, standing completely still, head wide open, ripe for the picking, and Francis couldn't do anything. I guess the one thing that kind of impressed me was that Francis Ngannou's takedown defense and grappling were on point, and he didn't get caught in that heel hook, and he was able to stay away from danger. And he actually took Ciryl down himself. But let's also be honest, Ciryl is not like this world-class wrestler and grappler. He submitted a couple cab drivers with Wikipedia pages earlier on in his UFC career. But the guys he submitted were not great fighters, Robert. But I was highly uninspired by this fight, this whole matchup, and both men's performances were not good.
Yeah, I think this fight, if you enjoyed this fight live, and to a degree I did, I think that's based on drama. I don't think this fight has a tremendous amount of rewatch value. I give Ngannou a little. I'm not going to give him a full pass. I'm going to give Ngannou his flowers where he deserves them. His cardio wasn't great, but it was certainly better than it has been in the past. He did too much following, but his footwork in most respects didn't quite fall apart the way that it did when he fought Stipe. When he fought Stipe, it just imploded.
This reminded me of his loss to Stipe, though. Really?
I can see where there are some similarities.
And I just thought he was because he was fighting a lesser opponent, he was able to squeak out a victory. And let's also be honest, no matter what the scorecards say, this was not a runaway victory for Francis.
No, not at all. That's actually one of the things I do want to give him credit for as well. He dropped 2 rounds to a guy who stylistically on the feet had his number and was able to make the requisite adjustments. That's not something. There's plenty of other UFC champions who can't do that. So I do want to give him credit for that. Again, if this is,
Yeah, he
one of your,
didn't. I'll credit him for that because he didn't make adjustments in the first fight with Stipe, and once Stipe weathered the storm, so to speak, he completely let the fight get away from him. But still, it reminded me of that fight and the fight with Derek Lewis, so it's hard for me to compliment him.
I see less of the Lewis fight in this. For a variety of reasons. But again, this was a slower paced fight. And the fact that this had to come on the heels of the flyweight title fight, which we'll get to in a minute or two here, it wasn't quite the back and forth war that their first fight was, but it was still a darn good fight. It suffered by comparison, to be sure. Now, coming out of this fight, there's a few interesting things. Let's start with the easiest one of these two questions to answer. That being, what do you do with the loser? What do you do with Cyril Gahn? This was his first professional loss. He's 10-1. Where he goes from here, my assumption would probably be Curtis Blades. I think having seen how this fight plays out, watching Gahn fight a dedicated wrestler like Blades is something we kind of need to see. We need to see if he can patch those, if he can address some of those habits.
I like that fight. I think that's a great idea. It's a matchup we haven't seen yet, and I would pick Curtis Blades in that fight.
I wouldn't, but I think there's plenty of reason to believe he could win that. The other major heavyweight fights we've got going on at the moment, just so everyone knows
that's
what's
a great fight. If Curtis Blades ever wants to make it back, try to get to the title level, which, let's be honest, the field at heavyweight is not that impressive or competitive. So a guy like Curtis Blades, coming off a win, it's not going to be that tough if he wants to earn a title shot.
The field at heavyweight isn't deep. The problem is there's a couple of guys at the top that create this big log jam. Not only do you have Francis, who Blades has lost to twice, you've got Gahn, who's beaten a fair number of decent heavyweights on his way up and might still be a serious problem for most of them. You've also got Stipe Miocic, allegedly. He's not retired, but boy, has his name been utterly absent from any kind of discussion about the division at the moment.
The whole industry is out of whack now due to the pandemic, and a lot of guys.
That's true.
The whole world has slowed down as a result, and it has affected UFC and MMA as well.
Yeah, it's affected what fighters they have available to them in certain respects.
And also the type of fights that are getting booked, and just a lot of. I think that's the reason we keep getting so many rematches.
Well, on the plus side, they've also got the puppy mill going, so that helps.
The what?
That's my nickname for the Contender Series these days.
Oh,
because
Robert.
Hang on, and here's my point on that. The first 2 seasons of the Contender Series, they were pretty selective about who they gave contracts to. In fact, some people who deserved them did not get them. Very famously, there's a guy in the PFL right now who just, I think, won their featherweight tournament who was not given a contract. Another guy who made his debut in the UFC through other avenues late last year won his fight on the Contender Series via wheel kick and was not given a contract. By the time you get to where the Contender Series has been for its last, say, 2-3 seasons, if you win, you get in the UFC. That's how that is. They're just constantly replenishing. They're constantly adding people to the roster like that. Hence, the puppy mill comparison.
Hashtag cancel Robert Winfree for the puppies.
I don't like puppy mills, for the record. They're terrible things.
No. I was saying that for the comparison.
Okay, fair enough.
Even though you are making fair points, but just I'm hypersensitive. I'm sorry.
That's fair. Again, puppy mills are terrible things for anyone who doesn't know what they are. They're awful. They're genuinely.
I was triggered. Let's just say I was triggered by that comparison.
Fair enough.
But I understand what you were getting at. But yeah.
Okay. The point being, at the end of it, we're getting a lot of lower level fights because certain fighters are either not available or due to the pandemic, like you said. The other heavyweight fights that we have in the near future booked. We have a pretty big step up for Tom Aspinall, one of the brighter prospects at the moment. He's fighting Alexander Volkov fairly soon, which is a really good fight.
We've also got tough test.
That's a big step up for Aspinall, 100%. I'm looking forward to that one. We also have the swangiest and bangiest of fights possible for the heavyweight division when Derek Lewis fights Tai Tuivasa. And
I'm picking Derek Lewis there.
That tends to be my inclination too.
Tai Tuivasa is fun to watch, but he's not a good fighter. I'm sorry. He had a three-fight losing streak at heavyweight. Come on.
Look, I'm not disagreeing with you. I kind of favor Lewis there. I don't know if that will get Lewis back into the heavyweight title picture or not. Some of that depends on Francis, and I want to talk specifically about him just in a second or two.
Okay. Look, here Tai Tuivasa's last. He is on a 4-fight winning streak, but let's look at this. One was a win over Stefan Struve in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
One was a guy named Harry Hunsucker,
who is a real human being.
Apparently,
he's a real person.
He is a real person. One is Greg Hardy.
Yep.
And another is Augusto Sakai.
Yeah, he's coming. I believe he's coming off the Sakai win, isn't he?
Right. So let's see. Is the only guy who is ranked is Sakai.
Yeah, Sakai was ranked when they fought.
Which, even at heavyweight, to me, that's a questionable ranking.
I think Sakai's ranking at the time was warranted, but he's that poor guy. He's in a rough spot. So
he's still ranked now, yeah.
He's still ranked, yeah, because heavyweight.
Hence again, heavyweight is not deep.
It's really not.
Be ranked.
So Lewis might get into the title picture with a win. The problem is going to wind up with again who he might have to face for the belt. There's also going to be the issue of
Francis himself.
Let's move on to Francis himself here for a minute or two. First of all, the guy's gonna be out for a while, assuming he's telling the truth about his knee injuries. And if you choose to disbelieve him, fair enough, but I'm going to take him at face value at the moment. And he took this fight with bum knees, at least his right leg in particular, I think. Torn MCL, partially torn ACL, something like that. So he's going to need surgery if nothing else. He's probably out for...
So credit to him for that, even though I've kind of been hard on him. But yeah.
So he's probably going to be out for at least 9 months. That seems to be about the appropriate timetable for a lot of that stuff. There's variability, of course. Which might actually see him out of his contract, and we'll get to that in a second. But if Francis sticks around... Making a rematch between him and Derek Lewis is just I'm not saying it's the worst thing in the world, but man, is that a big ask given how much their first fight sucked. That said, you might have to do it anyway if Lewis is able to get enough quality wins. The Gone loss...
Just a year ago, that was the one Dana White was pushing.
Yeah, he tried.
He was pushing that fight hard.
And then Lewis ran into Gone and just... fell apart completely.
John Jones can't keep his life straight, so
yeah,
there goes that matchup.
John's theoretically in play. I'm not going to factor him too heavily into this until we get something. Theoretically. Well, look, he's a name. He wants to fight in the division. He's under UFC contract. He's in play to one degree or another. I'm not going to factor
I'd
him
rather
too
say
heavily
John Jones is a person John Jones is a name, is a person that exists. Yes.
Yeah, so John's theoretically in play somewhere. But there's just too
John Jones is on Vormir.
There's just too big a question mark over John at this point for me to factor him too heavily, but if the UFC announced tomorrow that he was fighting for the belt, I wouldn't be surprised. So here's the bigger thing about Francis. In addition to needing the time off to get his knees taken care of, this was the last fight on his contract, and he's one of the first fighters that this has come up for now. For a long time, the UFC had in its contractual language a championship clause that would immediately renew your current deal if you were the champion. They didn't completely abandon that in mid 2017, but they did start adding sunset clauses to their fighter contracts overall. They cannot extend beyond a certain date, a certain time period. In this case, I believe 5 years.
Is that because of like the lawsuits that
yes.
are going on and what now? So they're trying to be careful or something?
Yeah, 100%.
Caution thing. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, the lawsuit there's a couple of lawsuits against the UFC at the moment. The most relevant one was initially brought by Kung Lee and John Fitch, among other people. And it deals specifically with the time period between like January of 2010 and I think June of 17. Hang on, I have the relevant information. Let me be sure about that. Yeah.
Plus they're now under new, they have new corporate ownership in the last few years, so it makes sense that they would reword the contracts.
Yeah, there's so that's when they started doing that. There's a second antitrust lawsuit that's been brought by a few other former fighters, among others Cajun Johnson and CB Dollaway. The time period that Kung Lee and John Fitch et al. Are talking about ends in June of 17. So again, it deals with this very specific time period where they're alleging unfair labor practices, antitrust violations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And everything after that is kind of what Johnson and Dollaway and a few others are trying to address. The UFC's change in contract language seems to be designed to kind of mitigate the argument for any time period starting in July of 17 up until today, so kind of going forward. The long and the short of that, if your eyes didn't cross too heavily when we were discussing contract language there, is in about 10 months, somewhere between like 10 and 12 months from now, Francis Ngannou could be out of his UFC contract and this isn't the first time the UFC heavyweight champion has had a dispute with them, not just Francis, but plenty of others. But it would
Randy Couture.
Couture famously, yes. This would be the first time since Couture that a UFC champion entered essentially the free market. Ngannou would be in a position to now he can't take the UFC belt with him because that's the UFC's belt, not anyone else's. Should he no longer be under contract, he is no longer the UFC heavyweight champion because he's no longer with the UFC. This is part of the reason that in boxing you have to have sanctioning bodies that own the belts, not the promoters. The UFC doesn't have that problem. The UFC has other problems, and I'm not going to litigate the totality of the difference between boxing and MMA as far as their execution. There's pros and cons on either side of that particular coin. But this is just the first time that a UFC champion can leave his or her contract, not retire and still be under contract for a period of years. That's been the case for a lot of fighters. George St. Pierre, again, talked about that not too long ago because he retired and still had like 3 years on his contract. So he's just about out of it now if he wanted to go fight somewhere else. So that's where so Francis could be waiting out his sunset clause at this point, and given the acrimonious relationship between him and the UFC at the moment, let me ask the question then. Is this the last time we're going to see Francis Ngannou fight in the UFC?
No. He'll come back. But this is a very confusing and nebulous situation to me. Here's why. I'm reading, this is from Mark Raimondi in ESPN. He's writing, he is still under UFC contract due to a champions clause.
He is, because after this, hang on. He is, but that can't extend beyond a certain date.
Okay, so here's what Ramundi reported. Ngannou has said he could sit out an entire year until that expires. So
Yes.
even though he's still under contract, for now, there's still a time period where it can expire. And then he said at the post-fight news conference that he didn't know where his future would be. Ngannou said, "Boxing is always in the back of my pocket. It is something I must do before the end of my career. It's not like I have a lifetime here." And
He's not wrong.
Ngannou is 35. He's
Yeah.
not. He's arguably already old for the sport.
Not so much for
So
heavyweight, but he's definitely
yeah,
not got a long period of time in
he's not
front
a
of him.
spring chicken. He's not a spring chicken.
No, not at all.
Part of this is the UFC's own doing. I mean, they were a big part of the Francis machine and they hyped him up a lot. So much so that it felt like the UFC picked Francis as their guy over Stipe Miocic, and I doubt Stipe was okay with that. I mean, remember, I think it was after the fight with Francis that Stipe wouldn't even let Dana White put the belt on him. Dana White did not put the belt on Francis last night.
No, he did not. Did you see the message that Francis's manager shared?
No, what was that?
Oh, I have to quote this because I don't want to get it wrong. Hang on. Francis Ngannou's manager is a gentleman by the name of Markel Martin. He's done a couple of podcasts when the issues with Francis and the UFC came up. He's talked a little bit about that. He's a representative for not WME, but the other big talent agency. I believe it's CAA is who he works. He's who he works with. And he shared a screenshot of a text message he received. He blocked out the number apart from the area code. The area code is 702, which is Las Vegas. But other than that, we don't know who sent this. It says, and I quote, I apologize for the language. "Let's see who gets the last word after tonight, you dumb black bitch. The fact that Francis would ever listen to you lets you know how much of a dumb piece of shit he is too. After this, you will go back to selling suits at Nordstrom, you fucking moron." Followed by 3 middle fingers. Close quote.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's pretty horrible.
All right. Well, we don't. Well.
Now look, the obvious implication here. Hang on. I don't know who sent this. No one does. We have an area code. Could have been anybody in the UFC. Could have been somebody. Could have been some random fan who texted that to him. MMA fans are very weird. So I'm not insinuating that it's anyone. Okay, that's what was sent to him, and he chose to share it. Again, could have been a disgruntled fan. Could have been Dana White. Don't know. I'm not. I'm not saying I'm not saying anything about who sent that. I'm saying.
Well, I mean, it could have been any. I mean, if there could have been, it could have been any number of people.
It absolutely could have. There's a lot of people in the UFC, and there's a lot of people
I'm looking at it right now, and that is very disturbing.
Yeah. Again, this also could have just been some deranged fan, because fans choose to put the UFC's interest above the fighters most of the time.
It's true.
So
I don't want to speculate. I don't want to speculate on who it is, but it did come from a 702 area code, and I don't know if that was a power play. If that was a power play by Markel Martin, good on Markel Martin.
Yeah, you should not be subjected to that kind of language. I don't care what, there's no call for you to be insulted like that when you're just doing your job. You can have acrimonious relationships. You don't. That was uncalled for.
Dana White did talk to TMZ. He's saying they'll work it out with Ngannou. Whatever.
I mean, that's all he's going to say at this point. He's not going to say, yeah, he's gone after he just, had that fight on your pay-per-view. So we'll wait.
You know what's weird? Like, Dana White sent he did send like a very, I don't really want to say similar, but he did send one of those Dana White type text messages to Gina Carano when they
Yeah.
were hoping to book Gina Carano versus Ronda Rousey.
Uh,
Um,
yeah.
and Ariel Helwani broke that story, and then in the last year or so, Gina Carano has become like persona non grata, and then Dana White was one of the only people to come to her defense publicly. So
Yeah.
irony.
This, just for the record, a temporary rending of this relationship does not preclude it being repaired in the future. That's certainly true. Uh, We've been getting some. Let me ask you about this one then, because this is another thing kind of related to this, and I don't put a
Okay.
tremendous amount of stock in this. But Tyson Fury, the lineal heavyweight champion of the world in boxing and the WBC heavyweight champion,
Don't get me
he,
started on that situation.
I'm going to ask about it because again, Fury
Okay.
Ngannou has talked about boxing, and I'll bring up the pay structure and the pay differential in just a second or two because there's a few different points that I think that bears discussing. But just about Francis and Tyson Fury, they've both kind of hinted at trying to work something out in that respect. One, I'm curious about your level of interest in it. I have none. I have no interest in that fight whatsoever. I mean, I'd cover it because of course I would, but like my
Francis
personal level of
Ngannou versus Tyson Fury?
in a boxing match, yes.
Absolutely none.
Okay.
And I think Francis would get destroyed and annihilated unless Fury just came in wildly out of shape and just didn't train at all.
Well, even wildly out of shape, he might still beat him.
Yeah. I mean,
And look,
to me,
that's not me. For the record,
my
that's not me
view on
saying
this has
Francis is
always
terrible.
been like a boxer beats an MMA fighter in a boxing match, and an MMA fighter in an MMA fight, an MMA fighter beats a boxer.
That's that's usually true. Thus far, it's been true. That's even true to the extent that it extends to Jake Paul and Tyron Woodley. They're different. They're different activities. Like they have
Let's just
some.
book Jake Paul versus Francis. Jake Paul versus Francis, Logan Paul versus Francis, back to back. Let's really do this.
You put them in a boxing ring. I might favor Jake actually, not Logan. Francis would kill Logan, but Jake might be able to do it.
Let's do it.
So
but I do think this problem is the UFC's own making, and I don't think they've taken the proper steps to, I think, kind of just get ahead of contract drama, fighter drama, and just like Francis was their guy. Like they built the Francis hype machine. So now Francis wants to get paid, and I can't really blame Francis for wanting to get paid.
To the best of my knowledge, Francis's requests / demands here are not at all unreasonable. I mean, obviously the big elephant in the room here is the man wants to be paid more. Now, because this fight took place in California and California does disclose purses, we know how much he made in terms of his purse. Now, obviously, there's a couple of other mitigating factors here. As a champion, he will get pay-per-view points. There's whatever money.
So it was a disclosed payout of $600K.
Yep.
Cyril Gahn got $500K.
Mm-hmm.
And Cyril Gahn was a champion going into this fight, even though it was a boo-boo belt championship and a fake championship. He was technically the championship, the UFC interim champion for this fight. So
yeah, so he'll get pay-per-view points as well.
Right.
But hang on. So Francis wants to be paid more. So again, I'm happy to stipulate that $600,000 is not the total of what he was paid gross. There's more to it. Again, there's pay-per-view. There's whatever athlete
How
compliance.
can the UFC not afford to pay him like $1 million?
They
$1
could.
million disclosed.
They easily could. Like that. This is one of the things about this. So by
And
way of,
and Dana White, he's doing interviews with people where even during a pandemic, he's like, last year is like, this is our greatest year ever.
it was. We know that. Like
Okay,
a lot of their financials are disclosed. 2021 was the most successful year for the UFC financially in its history.
All right. So how can they not afford to pay Francis Moore? I just don't get that.
They could. Now they won't, because the UFC has stated, and this is one of those things that people don't seem to understand. This is in court documents. This is in all kinds of other places. Like when the UFC was looking at being bought out, one of their package, they presented themselves as an entity. The UFC, this is stated again under oath because they're being sued over this. They want to keep their total costs, their total payout to fighters at less than 20% of yearly revenue. You ask if they could afford to pay.
Did
Francis
that come
Moore.
out during the lawsuit?
Yes. 100% yes.
And some of the stuff. Why WME IMG? They own the company, right?
Correct.
So what? I mean, why is it so? Why is it against the rules to alter the deal, so to speak?
It's not against the rules. This is what allows for maximum profit. And look, but
if you increase, but I mean, if your profits are increasing,
and they are for the UFC.
Okay, so if they are increasing and you got the ESPN money, I don't know. The numbers just don't. It doesn't add up to me. None of this adds up.
This is what they want to do as a part of their long-term strategy for maintaining giant profits. They could absolutely afford to pay fighters more. And look, in defense of the UFC partially, stress partially, there's other bits of overhead and whatnot that they have that other promoters don't. And I'm willing to stipulate this. I just find that 20% paid out to the fighters year over year to be gross.
But apparently it's still more than WWE's revenue split.
I have no earthly idea if that's true. Wouldn't surprise me.
Okay,
the last bit on the fighter pay here. Just it's easy for people to look at, Tyson Fury made $30 million for his third fight with Deontay Wilder, and he did. That was his purse. Wilder made 20. And again, that's just purse. That's not factoring any pay-per-view split or whatnot. And that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And it's easy to kind of point that out and go, well, Francis is making $600,000. Isn't this terrible? And it is. I have railed about fighters deserving more money than they get for quite a while at this point. But I don't even need to point out a big mega fight like Fury Wilder 3 to point out how kind of broken this whole thing is. Again, we have the full disclosed payout for UFC 270. The total paid out in purses, only in purses, not other locker room bonuses or pay-per-view points, but only in purses, is about $1.8 million. That's what they paid everyone. That was their total pay.
But boxing is a different type of infrastructure for a fight like Wilder versus Fury.
Hang on. I don't even need Wilder versus Fury for this. Because they made like 25 times what everyone was paid out for this. Like, okay, that set aside the mega fight. Right? There was a fight last year between by one of the top pound for pound skill wise boxers in the world, but he's not a big draw. His name is Terrence Crawford. He goes by Bud. He's a tremendous boxer. I love watching the guy fight. He just got out of a terrible acrimonious relationship with Bob Arum. And we know what his purse was for his last fight. He fought Sean Porter. He made $6 million for that.
Okay.
If you want to say that the mega fight is an unfair comparison, okay, I might be willing to grant you some of that. But if Terrence Crawford, who is skill-wise very near the top of the tree, but market-wise not quite so much, If that guy makes almost 3 times what you paid out in totality for a big pay-per-view event, something is fundamentally broken with how the UFC is paying their fighters, and that's starting to become more and more apparent.
The issue to me is boxing fights aren't promoted like UFC fights. And then with boxing, we can't even get Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua, or Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury. But now I feel like we're starting to have that problem in the UFC as well, because they're not
still
paying
not, yeah, and they're not getting paid either.
Because they're not paying their fighters enough. So I'm not. It's not that I'm pro UFC on this argument. To me, it's just that there are all these different variables, and there are all these different nuances that.
Oh yeah. Look, it's easy
I
to
don't know.
say.
It's uneven to me.
Yeah,
But that said, I do think the fighters need to get paid more. And I do think UFC needs to dramatically overhaul their business setup. Even if it and you know what, they might have to be and you know what, the UFC might have to be force kicking and screaming to changing the revenue split. But we'll see.
The only way that changes, and this is borne out through, again, not only testimony that we have during the lawsuit, but everything that they've done since. That will only change because they're not breaking the law. The UFC is absolutely they're not doing anything illegal at the moment when it comes to their revenue split. It's entirely within their purview to do this the way that they're doing it. And at the moment, everything seems above board. The only way this changes is through either some kind of legislation, be that written legislation from Congress or a serious enough ruling from a judge in a lawsuit, or a collective bargaining agreement for the fighters. Those are the only things that will force the UFC's hand.
Okay. There's something else I want to say on this matter.
Okay.
I mean, I agree with you. But if the fighters have to kind of, they're gonna have, if they want collective bargaining, they're gonna have to get it not themselves, but they're gonna have to do
what's the saying?
Here's what I wanted to say.
Sure.
UFC has successfully built an organization where, okay, these guys are not making Deontay Wilder or even Sean Porter money, but guys are able to make a living being professional athletes and being fighters. And a lot of these guys probably would not cut it in the pro boxing scene, and they became MMA.
100%. Anyone that could be a decent level boxer in MMA would be a decent level boxer because they'd make more money.
What was that?
I'm agreeing with you. Anyone in the UFC who could be a good boxer would just be a boxer because there is more money.
Right. So these guys would not cut it in pro boxing. And those that have boxing were not able to break through to that upper echelon to make serious money as boxers. Because here's the other thing about boxing. At the top, there's lots of money, but on those lower level cards, those guys are not making that type of money. And I would say there's still an uneven percentage of guys who are making that, those 7-figure, 8-figure paydays in boxing. The UFC. So here's where I will credit the Zuffa leadership. They've managed to build something where guys can make money in the UFC and they can make a career as an MMA fighter. And they've done it better than everyone else. And there have been a lot of fly-by-night companies and a lot of upstart companies, but the UFC has managed to, for better or worse, they have withstood the test of time, and they've built their business and organization and their infrastructure, and I think it has benefited the fighters to some degree. Maybe not enough as it should have, but I think it has. And
Well, there's an interesting point.
I think there's a lot of jealousy toward boxing, but to me, a lot of these guys would not be able to excel as pro boxers. So I mean, like if they're not happy with their fighter pay, and if they're not, I mean, okay, you would get paid more as a janitor, then become a janitor. Why are you? I mean, you want to be a fighter, and this is what, like, whatever happened to you in your life, this is what you chose to do. And to me, a lot of these guys, they just wouldn't be good. They wouldn't be able to cut it as boxers, and this is what they can do to make money. Now, that being said, to me, this if it is a 20% revenue or 17%, is what is it? 17.5%?
It depends on
15%?
how deep you want to dig into what they consider fighter compensation.
Okay.
Because the UFC includes however much they pay USADA, for example, as part of fighter compensation.
Okay.
Which I find
all right.
I find that a ridiculous argument.
And to me, I think there might have to be some kicking and screaming, forced to make changes here at some point. But like to me the boxing thing is, it's a bit of an apples and oranges thing here.
But I agree with you in the sense that it's not strictly one-to-one. And there's a variety of reasons for that. There are benefits to the boxing model. There are serious downsides to the boxing model. There are benefits to the UFC model. There are serious downsides to the UFC model. Like there is not an ideal circumstance, an ideal model for us to follow here. It's trying to find. It's a lot of a bit of trial and error and a bit of trying to find the best case. Trying to find what works.
Like, to me, it's disingenuous when, like, a guy like Bjorn Redney is like, we always paid our fighters 50% split or something, where we didn't even know what type of revenue Bellator was bringing in.
I've seen the financial breakdown on that. Bellator was pretty close to a 50-50 rev share split. I mean, don't get me wrong.
But what was their revenue? What was their actual revenue? You know what I mean? Yeah, I believe that, but I doubt they were raking in serious revenue. So it's not like it's hardly something I would compliment them for.
Again, I'll compliment the theory.
And that's just what I mean. This is it's a weird debate. It's a weird argument with all sorts of different things going on. And it's hard for me. I can't just make one black and white judgment on this.
There is a ton of nuance to it in certain respects. I think when you get dialed down to again specific subcategories of the discussion, there it gets fairly black and white. But I do think
a big part of this here. I think a big part of this is a problem of the UFC's own making, and I feel they have failed to really get in front of it. And I think the attitude of just like Dana White's leadership of just F you don't get it, or you don't get the business, it's just not working anymore. That I don't think is working right now.
Yeah, there's going to be a reckoning sooner or later about this, and I think you're right that's whatever change the UFC makes, it's not going to be voluntary.
Yeah, I think that's ultimate. Yeah, I feel like ultimately it's going to be something like that, but we'll see.
We will, and because this is what we do on the show, we will keep you all as abreast as we can of that as any of that situation develops. Specifically, we will, of course, with Francis Ngannou as we find out what lurks in his future. If I had to guess, within the next couple of months, the UFC will schedule an interim title fight for the heavyweight division, using the argument about Francis's injured knees, and then they'll probably release him on the last day of his contract, because of course they do. But we'll see. They might come to terms between now and then. Who knows? We don't know, but as soon as news breaks on that in any kind of meaningful fashion, we will, of course, discuss it here. All right.
I hope Brandon Moreno got a lot of Funko Pops while he was still champion.
Let's move on to that co-main event, since you brought up Brandon Moreno. The third fight between Brandon Moreno and Deiveson Figueiredo for the UFC flyweight title. Again, these two have met twice before. First fight wound up being a draw after a point deduction to Deiveson Figueiredo in the third or fourth round. I want to say third for a low blow. Wound up in a draw. One of the better fights of 2020. I forget exactly where it landed on my list, but it was top 5. They had a rematch because, of course, you do after a great fight that ends in a draw. And the rematch was not nearly as close. Brandon Moreno was just better on that night, beats Deiveson Figueiredo, submits him in the third round. We get the third fight here because I assume Askar Askarov was not able to go on a meaningful timetable. And I know I'm the only guy in the world beating the drum for Askarov to get his title shot, but I am, so I may as well continue to do so. Third fight here. Deiveson Figueiredo defeats Brandon Moreno via unanimous decision, 48-47 across the boards. Doing this live, I was 49-46 Figueiredo. I don't stand by that, especially the fourth round. I'm almost certain I got wrong. I wasn't able to watch all of that round necessarily as closely as I would normally. Stuff happens, distractions and whatnot. So I don't stand by 4-1. I don't.
It was a close fight. It was a close fight, and it was a matter of inches. I think Figueiredo just inched this fight out. I agree with the 48-47 scorecard. But Figueiredo got like several knockdowns.
He had 3 He's credited with 3 over the course of the fight.
He ended he almost he had an impressive finish to one round where I think most of the round I gave it to Moreno, but then at the end he got a solid knockdown and he almost locked in a submission. Now maybe he didn't. Now maybe the submission, if it almost finished Moreno or not, maybe it could be misleading. But still, that was the most momentous event that happened in that round, and that's why I gave that round to Figueiredo.
Ditto. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I was with you. Moreno was winning the third round until he got knocked down, and then a bit of an anaconda choke attempt. It was fairly early in the process of developing the choke, but it was still an attempt. So I think my scorecard, as I kind of revise it, would be 1, 3, and 5 to Figueiredo. But there were a few close rounds in there, man. The first two
rounds were fairly close.
Yeah. There were some interesting adjustments that Figueiredo made for this fight to make this work. First of all,
Figueiredo looked fantastic for one thing.
His weight cut, man. He moved his team. He was with the Fight Ready team, which is headed by Eric Albarracin and primarily produced Henry Cejudo. There's a few other people that have kind of moved into that camp nowadays. I think John Jones trains there at the moment. Zhang Weili moved there for her rematch with Rose Namajunas.
Henry Cejudo was helping him there. I mean, considering a guy who's struggled so much with the weight cut in the past, he really dialed it in. It wasn't just lip service. It clearly made the difference this time.
It absolutely made a huge difference. The other thing he did, and this was a technical adjustment, he was a lot more, and I don't think Moreno adapted to this the way that he kind of needed to. Figueiredo was a lot more measured in his offense. Moreno seemed to be waiting to kind of counter him with more wild engagements, and Moreno is very good in those situations. And anytime they got into kind of the brawl, Moreno seemed to be on the winning end of things. Commentary kind of noted that they thought maybe Brandon Moreno had a power edge. I don't think that's the case, having watched this fight back. I think it's more that Moreno's chin is better than Figueiredo's. And I think that's more what was causing some of those interactions to go the way they did. Not so much that Figueiredo isn't the harder puncher, but the chin differential leaning in favor of Moreno. But Figueiredo modulated his offense. He never got into, very rarely, I shouldn't say never, got into the wild kind of firefights. And
I feel like he got the better of a lot of those exchanges, and that just made the difference, plus the knockdowns.
Yeah.
And the leg kicks. And the leg kicks were very key in this fight, too.
Those calf kicks were pretty significant. I don't just mean that they kind of messed with Moreno. I think like 30% of his total strikes were those leg kicks, if you want to go by the numbers. That's a significant chunk of his offense, and some of them were solid kicks. He also mixed in takedowns very well, and credit to Moreno. By about the third round, those takedowns were going nowhere, and he was actively countering them, which caused Figueiredo to make a couple of adjustments himself. So we've another good fight.
Contrary to what Cecil People would say, leg kicks do win fights.
They absolutely can contribute. So we're now after 3 fights between these two gentlemen, we're at 1-1-1. And perhaps more notably, someone else pointed this out, I forget who, so I apologize. Having watched 7.5 rounds of fighting, but sorry, not 7.5, 12.5 rounds of fighting between these two guys, I'm still not sure who's better. Like, that's how evenly matched these two guys are. Sometimes when you get these long drawn out not just trilogy, but these rematches, by the time it's all said and done, you get a feel for who the better fighter is. I don't quite have that here. Like, I can see either guy winning. They've both proven that they can. In the immediate aftermath of the fight, Figueiredo said, we can do a 4th one in Mexico City. I don't think they're going to do that, mostly for travel and COVID related reasons. I don't think they're going to Mexico City. But credit to Figueiredo for immediately saying, yeah, this guy who's, given me the toughest fights of my career thus far, we need a 4th fight. And
there's no one else at flyweight. This is barely even a division.
Again, it sucks that they'll have to bypass, particularly Askar Askarov, who I think might take that belt when he fights for it. But I think he's got a fight coming up. So I'm the only guy beating that drum.
On an emotional level, I do feel bad for Brandon Moreno because he's such a likable chap and he likes Funkos and stuff. So I feel bad for him, but I mean, Figueiredo did a great job, and Figueiredo has really frustrated me in this past, but I thought he looked like $1 million last night. This to me is an example of a good technical fight. I love the technique on display here. I love the quickness, the cardio, guys not getting gassed after 5 minutes. Guys looking sharp and quick. I mean, and I know some people, the flyweight, as a weight class, it just doesn't translate for some people. But this fight last night is sort of like why I love flyweight so much.
Yeah, these two guys together, they've not had a bad fight between 3 fights, and one of them was I can't quite say all-time classic, but certainly a best of the year. This one might wind up featuring pretty highly come, end of the year for best fights of the year. Get them together for a 4th time. And hopefully, while that's going on, we get a genuine contender to emerge out of the rest of the pack at flyweight. This was a really good fight. Brandon Moreno, you mentioned how likable he is. He's not the most popular guy in the UFC, but he might be the most well-liked. I saw a brief little thing on Twitter that was, other fighters going, yeah, Brandon Moreno is my parents' favorite fighter after they met him. Even people who are in his weight class, like, yeah, my dad told me, Brandon Moreno is his favorite fighter, and even though we're in the same weight class, he'd probably root for Brandon. He's a really likable guy, and that man was more positive at his post-fight press conference after losing that fight than I've been in like 23 years. Like, I don't know how he's that upbeat about life, but God bless him, he is. So we probably get another fight out of those two. I say bring it on. I'm certainly okay with that fight. So anything else we want to touch on there before we move on to the rest of the card?
I love you, Brandon Moreno. Funko, make a Funko Pop of Brandon Moreno, please.
Have they not yet? If they
I'm
haven't,
not sure.
they need to. All right. As for the rest of this card, this was kind of a 2-fight card. The rest of it, there's some good stuff here, but there was not a lot of name value. So
okay,
the
there is a Funko for Brandon Moreno. Apparently, I'm sorry.
Good for him.
Make more. Make more.
So we're just going to kind of go through the rest of these fairly quickly. At welterweight, Michelle Pieja defeated Andre Fialho via unanimous decision, 29-20 across the boards. I was decently impressed with Fialho, given that he took this fight on short notice. He had a good first round, but the second round, his pressure let up a little bit. Pieja started finding his combinations. His front kicks to the body started adding up, and that body work, that can be brutal. So pretty good fight there. Bantamweight, Said Nurmagomedov defeated Cody Stamann via guillotine choke 47 seconds into the first round.
Oof.
Said Nurmagomedov, he's only got one loss in the UFC. He lost a decision to Hani Barcelos, and we'll talk about him again shortly. Nurmagomedov's a legit rising guy at bantamweight. He snatched up this guillotine real quick. Stamann tried to come up on a head outside single after catching a kick and head up a bit too much. Nurmagomedov sunk that left arm deep under the throat, got all the way to like the power guillotine grip or the ninja choke, depending on what you want to call it. And just done like dinner. Nice win for Said Nurmagomedov. Cody Stamann's he's been up and down in the UFC, but I don't think too many people have kind of run through him like that. I mean, he took Merab Dvalishvili to 3 rounds. Jimmy Rivera, he took 3 rounds. He even took Sterling into the second. So he's not an easy guy to look good against, and Nurmagomedov then with the most Russian post-fight interview ever. Hey, how do you feel? I'm very happy. Some people are going to be ducking that man. Just going to put it like that. Welterweight, Michael Morales defeated Trevin Giles via TKO punches 406 of the first. This was not the wildest fight of the evening, but Giles just tried to force the wrestling a bit too much, and then once he got a bit predictable, am I confusing him with someone else? I might be. I apologize if I am. Was a good win for this was a good win for Morales, who's got some good counter wrestling, and one of the few guys. Apparently, this came out as he was coming out. Apparently, both of his parents are judo black belts, and he's been doing a lot of wrestling training. So you can't just take the guy down at will. Might be someone to pay attention to. He looked pretty good here. That was your main card. As for the prelims, Victor Henry defeated Hani Barcelos. This was a really good fight. I picked Barcelos. Henry showed up big time. These two fought at a pretty crazy pace. If you didn't see this fight, look it up. This is well worth your time to watch. Solid win for Henry. Hani Barcelos is a legitimate top guy at bantamweight. At welterweight, Jack Della Maddalena defeated Pete Rodriguez via TKO 259 of the first punches. Della Maddalena looked smooth as butter. His striking was on point. Really nice pull counter too to end things. Just kept the jab going. When he got a reaction out of Rodriguez, slide back, left hand, boom. That dude is someone to pay attention to. This was about as good as you could look. Bantamweight Tony Gravely defeated Simon Oliveira via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Oliveira just kept trying guillotine chokes, and they kept not working. Lightweight, this was a nutty fight. Matt Frivola defeating Gennaro Valdez via TKO, 3:15 of the first. Craziest 3 minutes of action you'll see in a while. This was nutty. Fight should have been stopped before it was. The last knockdown, I think, was when it should have been stopped, but fun brawl there.
Mike Beltran was probably the referee.
He was.
No kidding.
As for the earliest prelims, Vanessa Demopoulos defeated Silvana Gomez Juarez via armbar, 225 of the first. Juarez badly hurt Demopoulos with a right hand, but went down to the ground with her, got caught in guard, and her grappling is a pretty big liability at this point, given some of the decisions she made here before getting armbarred. Not great. And kicking everything off, Jazz Davicius defeated Kay Hansen via unanimous decision, 130-27 to 29-28. Hansen just got out wrestled, and that was kind of the long and the short of the first two rounds. Third round was almost all on the feet. I thought Hansen won the third. Or the third was close enough that I don't object to it going either way. Wasn't great, but we got a lot of first round finishes on the evening, so there was that. All right, Jeff, what sticks out to you when we look at the rest of that card, if anything?
Okay, so that guillotine by Nurmagomedov, like Cody Stamann, not a world beater, but he's a tough opponent. Getting it done in less than a minute, that was slick. And Nurmagomedov, he's definitely a guy to watch. He's a legit prospect. I don't know where they find this kid, Michael Morales, but he's 13-0 now, 21 years old.
Ecuador.
He's from Ecuador.
Second Ecuadorian fighter in the UFC after Marlon Vera.
He looked really good last night. He's, I don't know how well he'll be able to do, but based off his performance last night, he looked really good. Mike Beltran, man, it got so bad last night, I was like, don't even let him back in the cage. Especially that fight with Giles Morales. He looked, I don't know. Mike Beltran has never been one of the greatest referees to me. He's never really established himself as really an upper echelon, upper tier referee. I don't think he was doing a good job last night. Now, that's just my opinion. I feel like it happened multiple times where he was very slow, where fighters were taking lots of unanswered shots and not really intelligently defending themselves. And my general view is, I think, yes, you can sometimes show leniency in certain situations, but when a prone, vulnerable fighter is taking so many unanswered shots to the head, I think you can't do what Mike Beltran was doing. But that's just my opinion. So I'm sorry if I offend anyone.
He didn't have a great night last night. I think that's kind of. I think it's fair to observe that.
That's putting it mildly, Robert.
Well, look, he still wasn't that Russian ref from a few events back that has a reputation on the independent scene as a guy who just, if you're not unconscious, he won't stop a fight. But yeah, it's not the best night in Mike Beltran's career.
So I hear I'm not going to say it, but congrats to Vanessa Demopoulos too. Good for her. I want to see more. I want to see her in more fights.
You almost phrased that very awkwardly, considering her former profession.
Yes. I stopped myself though.
I appreciate that.
I want to see more fights. I want to see her in more fights based off her performance last night.
Wait, was it Demopoulos or Jazz Davicius? I think it was Jazz Davicius. I'd have to double check that.
The one we're thinking of is Demopoulos. She armbarred Juarez.
Yeah. Well, okay. For those of you who don't know what we're referencing, one of these two ladies worked as
jumped into the arms of Joe Rogan.
She did. She absolutely did. One of these two worked as an exotic dancer, and left that just 8 weeks ago to do the fight camp. So there's and that's not me shaming in any particular kind of context.
I highly respect that.
You got bills to pay. I'm not here to pass judgment on any of that. and you might wind up.
And she
picking up,
looked great. She looked great. She did a good job. And when I mean look great, I mean she fought well.
needs to definitely work on her striking defense.
Now I feel like a skeevy jerk. Thanks, Robert.
I apologize for that.
Hashtag cancel Jeffrey.
She needs to work on her striking defense pretty obviously. Some of those punches she got hit with were not exactly well set up, but her grappling is top notch. She's competed. She's competed in some fairly well known grappling competitions. So still got some work to do, but if anytime things hit the mat with her, she's a very good jiu-jitsu practitioner.
Well, I read she quit just 6 weeks before this fight. So I mean,
and
even more respect for her toughness, you know.
And given that I think she's paid like 10 and 10, she might wind up picking up a few other shifts to cover the bills for her next fight. That's a shot at the UFC's pay structure, not anything
else. Right. Yes. That's a fair observation.
Well, I mean, look, a lot of fighters have jobs to go along with
have side hustles. Yes.
Yeah. And again, if that's what you have to do for any number of reasons, hey, again, no, I am not.
Carlos Condit has like a business selling like medical equipment, and I think he was doing like this cold brew coffee thing or something.
Yeah, again, a lot of fighters, fighting's not something that you can do long term. So you gotta have do what you can.
You gotta have some side hustles and some plan B, C, and D's basically.
Pretty much. All right. As for your official post-fight bonuses, officially, fight of the night was Figueiredo and Moreno, with performances going to Said Nurmagomedov and Vanessa Demopoulos. No real objection to any of that. I
think you liked the Barcelos fight the most, didn't you?
I did. That's just me personally, but giving it to Figueiredo and Moreno is like that's a matter of just like degrees. I'm not objecting to that at all. It was a darn good fight. So yeah.
Now talk about guys who are underpaid, like Figueiredo and Moreno. Just for how much they please me, and I think how well they fight and how hard they clearly worked. I'd be like, pay those guys $20 million. To me, these guys are worth more. These guys are worth more to the sport to me than Sean Porter is to boxing.
Well, considering Porter retired after that fight, yeah. Look, both of those guys should probably have.
That fight was that was the whole reason I wanted to watch the card. Like that was the highlight of the night for me because it wasn't Gane versus Ngannou.
Look, those two guys should both have at least one more zero at the end of their paychecks. Like at least.
At least. Yep.
So, and
on top of pay-per-view points.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think the most egregious thing that the UFC does, if we want to talk rev share and whatnot, my opinion is that everything that they get from ESPN should go. You should split that between yourselves and the fighters, and they don't. Like that goes to the UFC. But that's something that fighters have to kind of hash out with the UFC. So, yeah, UFC's making a ton of money, guys. Unionize, you can get a bigger slice of the pie than 20%. All right, so that was UFC 270. I thank everyone who followed along with my live coverage or read the report after the fact. Both of those are available at 411mania.com.
And there's no event next week.
Well, there was no UFC event. However, I got roped into covering the WWE Royal Rumble on Saturday, so that'll be fun.
Oh. Best of luck on that.
Thank you. I get the feeling I'm going to need it.
Since I was last on, I went to SummerSlam.
I do. I remember you going to that. I'm glad you had a good time.
I covered it for 411. I was WWE actually credentialed me. I don't know how that happened, but it did.
Yeah, I'm glad you had a good time. I mean, that was the one at that's the Reliance Center, right? The big Death Star in Vegas.
No.
No,
Not Reliant.
not Reliant.
Allegiant.
That's it. Something like
Allegiant
that.
Stadium. But yeah, it does look like a base like that, like Cobra or
Yeah.
like some sort of sci-fi movie thing. It would be like the base of operations for like a super secret organization or something. Yeah, it was really cool. But I feel bad for the attendees that night because all the computers went down because they were supposed to be a cashless stadium. So like nothing. Apparently things didn't work, and it was very hot that day too.
That was Vegas in the middle of the summer. Yeah, that'll cook some brain cells off.
It cooked. It definitely cooked my car. My battery was shot after that trip.
All right. Let's see. That's all that I have listed here. Let me give a quick scroll through Twitter and see if anything crazy is broken. If not, do you have anything MMA related, news wise or whatnot that you want to touch on?
I mean, we kind of touched on most of it. There was that thing. Did you hear about that thing with Dan Hooker and John Jones?
A few weeks ago when they started trading insults, yeah.
Was that a few weeks ago?
It's been a couple of weeks, yeah, I think.
Okay.
But
What was it? Life hack: if you don't beat up your wife, family events will be more enjoyable. Merry Christmas.
yeah,
wife.
they threw some. Those two threw some.
You know what? Dan Hooker may never be a UFC champion, but on Twitter, he ethered John Jones. Ethered, however you say it. There was another really good one.
There have been a few. Again, John whenever John starts tweeting, people get after him.
I mean, Jones should probably stay off Twitter now. Man, John Jones truly is. But you know what? John Jones truly is a Darryl Strawberry of MMA. That's the only way I can really put it.
That's not the most unfair comparison that could be made.
And probably he'll be at some presidential rallies sooner rather than later. You know what I mean. I mean.
He might. Would not terribly surprise me, but you know, I'm fairly convinced that a significant number of the people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th last year were MMA fans. I think Pat Miletich was actually there. That's not a joke. That's not me meaning. I'm pretty sure Pat Miletich was there.
I can't get that visual of the guy with was it the moose hat or whatever didn't he have like a Cesar Gracie? He had some sort of like
the QAnon shaman, the guy with the like water buffalo headdress or whatnot.
Yeah, the water buffalo. Yeah. Who was that?
I don't know his name. I don't care.
But I feel like I think he had like an MMA tattoo.
Probably.
That I recall. That looked something that looked familiar, that looked MMA related. But yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if there's been too much. I mean, Francis Ngannou, he was on the Daily Show a while back.
That thing's still going?
Just before. Yes, with Trevor Noah, just before this fight, to talk about his career in fight.
He got a write-up.
He did. Yeah.
He got a write-up in like the New York Times, and I think he was on the cover of the ESPN magazine. Like Ngannou made some headlines this last couple of weeks.
Oh, here we go. UFC 276. So they announced International Fight Week. It's going to happen in Vegas, presumably. UFC 276 will be July 2nd at the T-Mobile. That was the same weekend UFC was supposed to do Money in the Bank 2022, which was supposed to return to Allegiant Stadium that weekend. So I think UFC was going to have their event on Saturday. and that's when UFC is having their event. So there might be, so now that UFC has announced Fight Week and UFC 276, there might be sort of like a kink in that for WWE.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the WWE's been experimenting with these Saturday events, or we'll see if they keep that or if they go back to Sunday in the near future.
Right.
So that remains to be seen. But yeah, they announced that. Yeah, it's
Meanwhile, AEW goes to Sunday after they were having a lot of their shows on Saturdays before.
yeah, I imagine they'll figure out which one works best for them. Yeah, all relevant.
Okay, 271, we're finally getting Adesanya versus Whitaker too.
I am very excited for that.
I'm picking Adesanya there, but look, Whitaker's looked very good lately, so we'll see what he can do this time. Whitaker is a great fighter.
I still favor Adesanya, but I expect this to look nothing like their first fight.
I agree. Whitaker was clearly burned out when their first fight happened. So, and I mean, he's made a lot of good. I mean, he hasn't lost. It doesn't look like he's lost a step at all to me. So I like the fight.
He's looked really good his last couple of fights. I'm really excited for that fight. So hopefully it holds together.
We did touch on it earlier. Tyson Fury welcomes Francis Ngannou to make some real money. So let's see. Tyson Fury tweeted, "Congratulations, Francis, but if you want to make some real money, come see the GK." So he's putting it out there.
You know what? You and I might have no interest in that fight, and I've said this before. I don't I don't have any interest in those two boxing. I don't have any interest in those two fighting at all. I don't care the rule set. But let's not pretend that wouldn't sell. Like if that gets made through whatever mechanism, that's going to sell a lot of pay-per-views.
This is a bit of a sad story to me. A fighter who fought in Bellator and UFC, Michael Falcao, died.
Yeah, I heard that.
Was stabbed to death. Wow, I didn't even know. Yeah, so this was reported today. Kind of sad, just a guy with a lot of potential.
Apparently, some people mentioned he apparently had been just in a lot of street fights in Brazil. If he was still
that's what got him. That's what got him. I think fired from Bellator, as I recall.
Probably
there was like this surveillance video of him assaulting a woman in a gas station and being in a street fight. Yeah, so that's why he was cut from Bellator. So, yeah, so I mean, a guy. It's disappointing. It's disappointing to see a guy so young lose his life.
Yeah, that's always sad. So for the record, gentlemen, this is why you don't engage in street fights whenever possible.
Yeah.
Because even if you're that's also just as a minor aside, that'll tell you how effective a force multiplier just a knife is. Like even someone who is very well trained in fighting, put him in there against someone who's got a knife, and that goes badly for the unarmed person more often than not.
What's going to happen is John Jones ever going to fight again? Like, what is the deal here? What is he going to do?
I have no idea. I have no idea what's going to happen. At this point, I'm going to wait until something actually comes about, because otherwise, I have no idea.
The John Jones story is such a bizarre story. It's like half of it is like just this wunderkind, and like the other half of it is just disappointment and frustration.
For as every bit as good as he is at managing a fight, he is that bad at managing his life.
I remember like Daniel Cormier. He kind of. I don't know. He kind of I don't know if this was the right way to put it, but like he said something like because he failed to beat John Jones, like John Jones never like I think he said something basically to the effect of John was never really punished for his wrongdoing. And because he didn't beat John Jones and humiliate him, it never gave John time for self-reflection and to really look inward. I don't know if that's true at all for John Jones because I don't know how John Jones really looks at these sort of incidents in his life that are mostly brought on by himself. Um, but I don't know. What do you think of Daniel Cormier saying things like that?
I think Cormier has a slightly inflated sense of himself and his importance in the lives of
Yeah.
others.
Yeah, but I thought that was interesting.
Well, he's trying to play off of something he said in the build to their, I think it was the build to their second fight. Second fight or first, I can't remember. They put together this really awesome promo package set to Arsonist's Lullaby. So someone else can tell me which of those fights that was. But one of the things he said in the build up to that was, John, in order for John to realize how great he can truly be, he has to lose to me and then build back up. And
Okay.
it was something to that effect.
See,
And I don't give that
because
a whole.
he never truly lost. He
that.
never truly lost. But would it? I wonder though. I don't know if it would have really affected him all that much if he did lose a fight. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
This is one of those things where someone is trying to apply elements of their worldview to another human being with no evidence that it necessarily correlates that way.
I do think now look, I'm not a psychiatrist and I'm not a doctor, so I'm sorry, but I do think John Jones has, just as a person, has failed to really take responsibility for himself.
To the extent that we have information and evidence, I don't disagree. So, yeah, again, will he come actually make it to the ring this time? To the cage? I don't know. Would I favor him to beat either Francis or Cyril Gahn? It's a tough one. I might favor him over Francis, maybe not so much over Gahn, but then again, I don't know. I would have to give that a lot of serious consideration. There's too many unknowns with John and how he might look at heavyweight, but given his fighting ability, I think you'd be foolish to discount his potential to be successful at that weight class. So, if that's everything,
yeah, I think that's all we got.
Let's get into plugs then. It's been a while since you've been here, so what do you got to plug to the people? Where can they find you?
Okay, so check out my Twitter at Wheeljack83. If you go to the 411 Wrestling Interviews podcast, check out my latest interview with John Alba, where we talk about the extreme life of Matt Hardy and working with Matt Hardy on their new project. That's on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Play. And review-wise, check out my latest review of Scream. Technically Scream 5, but they're calling it Scream.
It's Scream 5. That's to the marketing department.
It's Scream 5. Spider-Man No Way Home and The Kingsman. I don't know what I'll be reviewing next, but just because the movie scene right now is very volatile, and it's we're still in a pandemic.
And the Mission Impossible movies didn't the Mission Impossible movie get pushed back another year?
Again for like the 5th time.
Yeah, at this point I wonder if they're just waiting for Tom Cruise to die so they can recast Ethan Hunt.
That's so mean, but Tom Cruise
it is.
He will be in his 60s when the sequels come out now. So yeah. Check those out on the 411 Movie Zone. But yeah, so more than anything, everyone stay safe, and I hope you're staying well and doing okay during this challenging time.
All right, as for myself, I'll be pretty brief here. For my other podcasting endeavors, last week I got together with Mark Radulich and Ronnie Adams. We reviewed Scream 5, mostly favorably. The week before that would have been the 355, mostly unfavorably. If you're interested in my thoughts on movie reviews and whatnot, those podcasts are over in the W2M network. Wherever you're listening to this, punch in "Damn You Hollywood" and you can find that particular podcast. This week, Mark and I are going to do a "Damn You Hollywood" for the Netflix movie Munich Edge of War, which is about the peace conference to dissuade Adolf Hitler after. It's the conference that basically ceded the Rhineland back to Germany and paved the way for more of Hitler's expansionist aggression. Jeremy Irons plays Neville Chamberlain, so we'll be talking about that, as well as our retrospective of the 2021 movie year and box office and whatnot. So tune in for that if you're so inclined. My other coverage efforts this week, I already mentioned one of them, but I cover professional wrestling a few nights a week. AEW's Dark Elevation on Monday, MLW on Thursday, and WWE SmackDown on Friday. This week I will be adding to that the WWE Royal Rumble on Saturday. So if you're interested in any of that, please do stop by over in the wrestling zone of 411mania.com and you can find my work. There is no UFC event on Saturday, as already mentioned. We will be back here next week, however, to preview UFC Fight Night, UFC on ESPN Plus 58. That will be coming your way February 5th and is headlined by a pretty good middleweight fight, actually, between Jack Hermanson and Sean Strickland. The rest of that card, well, it ain't great. But we'll give you a full preview next week so you can hear my thoughts on all of those fights. God, why? Sam Alvey. Why? Why is Sam Alvey still in the UFC? You guys are cutting people left, right, and center for you're almost as bad as WWE in that respect for budgetary reasons, but you've still got Sam Alvey here.
I guess the pandemic saved him.
He's on a 5-fight losing streak.
Yeah, but I mean, the pandemic has caused a lot of craziness in this sport. Lot of weirdness.
You could hire, for what the UFC pays people coming off the Contender Series and what they pay Sam Alvey, you could cut Sam Alvey and hire like 6 other fighters.
Robert is anti-fighter. # cancel Robert Winfree.
No, Robert is anti-Sam Alvey.
I'm just kidding.
I'm
sorry if you're listening, Sam Alvey. I apologize.
Have a good fight for once in the last 3 years, and I'll reconsider my position. God, he's been in part of the worst fights of the year for 3 or 4 years in a row.
There was a period where I was like, okay, Sam Alvey earned his spot for a little while.
I completely agree with that.
That time has long passed.
That's more the issue. I'm not going, how did this guy ever make it to the UFC? He was good for a while and had some good knockouts. He had a good winning streak at one point. But it's 2022, not 2016. Shavkat Rakhmonov is on that card. Okay. Now I'm interested. I like Rakhmonov. Anyway, full preview of that event next week right here on the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, as well as a discussion of whatever news happens to break. Y'all know the deal here. And that's when we'll be back. So, on behalf of Jeffrey Harris, I'm Robert Winfree, thanking you all once again for being here. Until next time, stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.